Okay, Mr. Chairman, I hope we have a second round, but I beg your
we will.
Thank
we
you
will
for
have a
the
second
indulgence.
round. We will. I yield to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Konjorski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Lee.
Good morning.
Since you last appeared before Congress, and that was several months ago, at that time you had indicated that when you took command of AIG, it had counterparty obligations of approximately $2.7 trillion, and that you would reduce that to approximately $1.7 trillion at the last time you testified. Could you give us any indication where that exposure is today?
Yes, at its zenith, that number was $2.7 trillion. At the end of the first quarter, at the end of April, it was down just below $1.5 trillion. So we continue to make progress. We continue to make good progress.
Do you have any time frame in mind as to when you will get down to the level that there will not be systemic risk exposure to the taxpayers of the United States?
I do. We are, first, we'd like to make progress in that every single month and every single quarter. But we think by the end of the year that that $1.7 trillion and the 27,000 trades that exist will be materially smaller. The challenge is if you go too fast, you wind up settling those trades at a disadvantage to us, and therefore it costs the American taxpayer more. So trying to do that with a little balance in the system is appropriate. We think we can get the right balance and make material progress by the end of the year.
All right, thank you. Did I detect in your response to the chairman and the ranking member in regard to providing your bailout plan or your plan of final execution that you have recorded or indicated exposure to Federal Reserve and Treasury but have not made it available to the committee staff, is that because you may be suspicious of the Congressional Billboard Company that we have here in the Hill?
No, it reflects really just my concern that if that information gets out and gets in the hands of our competitors and it tells them what our roadmap is to resolve AIG's difficulties, that they will use it against us and it will make it even harder to achieve the success that we want to achieve. It's as simple as that.
I'm not criticizing your judgment.
No, I got it.
The humor of my chairman and the ranking member. The one thing I'm interested in, you can be very helpful to us. You know, I'm involved in another committee, and we're writing and deciding on what we're going to do with the insurance industry. And when you analyze AIG, you recognize, for all intents and purposes, it was a wonderful and very successful insurance company, except it had some people call rogue organizations or offshore organizations, the London Group, the financial products division of AIG in London. They were really the organization that, in getting involved in taking positions as counterparties, that they made the great opportunity of risk and weren't the best purchaser of those documents or situations. Now, that was not regulated, I take it, very stringently by your New York State regulator. Is that correct?
The financial products business was not regulated by any of the insurance regulators because it wasn't an insurance subsidiary. It was regulated by the OTS.
Okay. Now, is OTS have a history or real experience with regulating that type of offshore operation to high success in your estimation?
I think not. I think the last time I was before Congress, I was part of a panel that included the interim director of the OTS, and I think he said as much. They simply lacked the capacity and the ability to adequately supervise businesses that were in Wilton, Connecticut, London, Paris, Tokyo, what have you, dealing in these very complicated financial instruments.
After 9 months now, that's a short period of time, relatively speaking, to get the total lay of the land or to understand the culture. But would you feel qualified to render an opinion at this point that looking at the existence of not only AIG but several insurance companies that have the opportunities to do what they did in getting into the offshore operation in London and getting into derivatives, do you have any opinion as to whether or not it would be helpful and more protective to the American taxpayer to avoid their exposure and to the economy to avoid systemic risk if in some way we developed a federal insurance charter that would be a regulator of that operation and much more closely involved than the present regulators have been? Do you have can you render that opinion first, and if you can, will you?
I can give you some preliminary thoughts. I don't know if it's a federal insurance regulator as much as there needs to be someone who looks at systemic risk across large organizations. So in my judgment, AIG should have been the great insurance company it was, and it should have stuck to that knitting. It should not have gone off into the financial products world. Once it did, I think it would have been helpful if there was an overseer or a regulator. Once a company gets to a certain size or engages in certain kinds of products, that company ought to be subject to some broad brushstroke regulation, which I think right now does not exist. I saw that the individual, Sheila Bair, who heads up the FDIC, had a proposal where you'd bring together the heads of the Federal Reserve and Treasury and FDIC, and they would share common knowledge about which institutions perhaps are engaging, either are too large or have too much systemic risk, or are engaging in practices that could cause difficulty. That struck me as a sensible way of using the current regulatory environment, but getting more emphasis on those businesses that simply have become either too large or are engaging things that are outside of their core skills.
I think you're referring to Senator Collins' proposal in the Senate.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought it was, I don't know. I thought, when I first read it, I thought it was part of an FDIC, part of Sheila Bair's recommendation, but I could have that entirely wrong.
A gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Congressman Bill